Dream a little dream of me. Welcome, kindreds. It's Jessica TheStoryWitch, and this is episode 11 in the Astrology for Witches podcast. The Astrology for Witches series I'm making here on my channel. I think I've lost the plot today. One quick little note before we dive into the topic for this episode. I wanted to say that I think I've talked about it before, but for short, sharp insights into things like the aspects and stuff like that, the Astrology Bites podcast, which is why I was thinking podcast, is really helpful. So if you don't want to dive into the whole astrology podcast, which is, like I said, is really kind of hardcore, Astrology Bites, which is Teresa Reed, the tarot lady, she does in the Astrology Bites podcast, and it's literally like a few minutes on each thing, and she's got like ones for each of the aspects, short and sharp and sweet, and they're really, really useful. So yeah, go ahead and check those out. So this episode is going to be about planetary rulership, and somewhat about Time Lords, but that's more complicated, so we'll come to that in a moment. So let's talk about planetary rulership. Who is your ruling planet? I have touched on this already when I was talking about the planets. It seems like ages ago. It was quite a long time ago now. The planet that rules your ascendant is your planetary ruler. So for example, if your ascendant is in Scorpio, then Mars is your ruling planet. So that planet will be your ruler for your whole life. It is the main planet in your chart. And some people feel a strong affinity for their ruling planet, some people don't. And usually that depends on what else is kind of going on in their charts. I gave that example there of Mars then, and I said that if you're in Scorpio, then Mars is your ruling planet, because I'm using the traditional Hellenistic astrology correspondences of ruling planet with sign. It is possible, and some people do use the modern association. So say your ascendant was in Scorpio, instead of saying that Mars is your ruler, they would say that Pluto is your ruler. But I do find that less helpful, because with the last three planets that have been discovered, with Neptune, Uranus and Pluto, they're more about kind of epochs of time, much longer swathes of time that are kind of beyond our human lives, really. You know, they move slowly, and they tend to affect things on a kind of generational scale, like we talked about before when I was talking about those outer planets. So having one of those as your ruling planet, like, you know, you can always have in your head, if Scorpio was your ascendant, then Mars is your ruler, but you also have a kind of affinity for Pluto and for Plutonic kind of themes. Yes, of course, but it is Mars, in my opinion, which is a more useful to have as your ruling planet. You know, when you don't have a choice in it. Or say that you have a Libra ascendant, and then Venus is your ruling planet, or you have a Virgo ascendant, Gemini is your ruling planet, and so on, you know. So find out your ruling planet. If you're not sure, if you go back to the episode I did on planets, I say which one is the ruler of each as we go along, or it's very easy to search online, you know, what is the ruling planet of this sign. And then think about the properties of that planet. The properties, that's a very impersonal way. Think about the personality of that planet is probably a better way of saying it. And think about how you relate to those themes, and try not to be too, like, I know when we talked about the planets, sometimes astrology can be very kind of black and white. This means this, this means this, and it needs to be jailbroken. We've talked about this before. You know, you need to see Venus is not just, you know, in a man's chart, Venus is not just what he wants in a woman. You know, we need to unpick that and kind of figure out what's behind it. So think of the larger terms, look up the myths associated with that character and planet, and that planet's character. Look up the layers of, like, if the planets are all gods and goddesses, you can look up the other equivalent. You know, whether they really are or not equivalent is a matter for, you know, different people will disagree on that. But you can look up, you know, when we're talking Venus, are we talking Ishtar? When we're talking Mars, are we talking Aries? Are we talking you know, as in God of War, Ares, not Aries the ram, you know. And when we're talking Jupiter, are we talking Zeus? Are we talking Thor? You know, there are stories and there are different characters and there are different places in the world, and we can kind of tap into all of that and see how it sits with us. So explore your ruling planet, explore the potential of what it means. Then look at where your ruling planet is in your chart. So your ruling planet is determined by your ascendant, but your ruling planet may not, you know, it's only a 1 in 12 chance it's going to be there in that first house. So it's not necessarily going to be in the same place as that. Where is your ruling planet in your chart? Which sign does it fall in? Which house does it fall in? What aspect? You know, we've covered the aspects now. So is your ruling planet making aspects to other planets? What aspects are those? Are they difficult aspects? Are they easy aspects? Are they both? You know, because planets usually make more than one. There's a lot to be gleaned from that. Also, I found useful, like this series I've approached from a Western astrology viewpoint, and kind of more specifically a kind of Hellenistic traditional astrology perspective. But with planetary rulerships, I found it quite useful to look at some of the Vedic stuff as well, and what that has got to say about planetary rulerships, because they have quite specific things, you know, like if Venus is your planetary ruler, these are the specific challenges you're going to face in your life. This is kind of your mission, I guess, for your life that you need to figure out. So that's something that's a possibility to be looked up as well. So enjoy that. And now a little segue, but something which I've found really interesting and useful, and which you may find too. Once you understand that idea of planetary rulership, there is something called Time Lords, which is not an easy concept. It's something that there are different astrologers throughout history, you know, Dorotheus, Valens, people like that have had very different ideas of how to calculate your Time Lords. So the way that I'm talking about it, when people say Time Lords, this is quite often what they mean, is something called annual perfection. Now, perfection is just like a kind of moving on of something. So the annual perfection just means like the moving on of your ruling planet. So say your ascendant, I'll use mine because, you know, it's easy for me. My ruling planet is Venus, as I said. My ascendant is Libra. So that is me, that's my natal chart. But then astrologers say for every year of your life, you have a different ruling planet. You still have the same ruling planet as your like overall ruler, but then you have a different ruling planet that moves around your zodiac. So for the second year of my life, between 1 and 2 years old, my if I'm perfecting my chart, that means moving it on to the next sign, to the next house, to the next whole sign house. So it moves from Libra into Scorpio. And then for that second year, my ruling planet was Mars. And my parents would probably say that is a fair a fair reflection of that year of my life. And then, you know, it would move on again for the next year of life into Gemini, and then my ruling planet would be Mercury. And that was probably when I was quite precocious with like learning to read and things like that, and to speak a lot. You might have noticed. So that would also make sense, you know. It's also the year that my sister was born, and Gemini rules siblings and things like that as well. So, you know, these are very kind of like simple, superficial kind of comparisons. But what I'm saying is, if you look at your chart, and then your ascendant sign is your 0 to 1 year old, and then the next sign is your 1 to 2 year old, and the ruler of that sign would be your ruler for that age of your life, and then the next one would be your ruler from 2 to 3 year old. You see where I'm going with this now? So in 12 years it moves all the way around the zodiac. So you can work out what year you're in now of your life, how old you are, and then you can look to see what is your annual perfection for that particular year of your life. Just take care, because I've seen some people calculate it wrongly, because they count the ascendant as house 1, your first house is house 1, whereas it's not, is it? Because if you think about it, as I was saying here, that first chunk, that first segment is from 0 to 1. So 1 doesn't come until the cusp between the first and second house. I hope I'm explaining this okay. I'll try and find some like links to back this up, so if it doesn't make sense, you can kind of figure out as well. So you can, there's also charts where you can literally just look down, okay, I'm this age now, this is my ruling planet, you know, this is the house I'm in now, the sign I'm in now, this is my ruling planet for now. So that makes things easier. I'll see if I can find something like that to link in with this video to make it really, really simple. But you can also do it retrospectively, and I found this really interesting. Like look back, like especially if you're, you know, you're a little bit older and things, you know, you've had things in your life, you might want to look back. What year was I in when I got married perhaps, or when my children were born, or when I got that particular job, or when I lost that particular job, or, you know, major life events, when I had that illness, or when, you know, this situation was happening that was really difficult for me. And you can start to kind of see which house and which ruling planet of that house and sign was in play, and it can give you an idea of what might happen the next time you go into that, because obviously, you know, we keep all going round and round, hopefully for a long time, so we have chance to revisit those themes with that ruling planet, that perfected ruling planet, as we go along. So that can be something that's really useful, and that is your homework. Feel free to not do it, I won't be marking it. But it's useful, I think, and it is helpful. And as you're approaching your birthdays, I'll be approaching my birthday now in June. I am approaching my birthday is in June. Then I'll be moving into a different annual perfection year. I'm actually going to be moving out of a Jupiter into a Mars ruling planet year. So, you know, it is what it is. We'll see what happens. But yeah, that's something that is like an add-on, it's an interesting thing to consider. But the main, I suppose the main thrust of this is that the ruling planet, who is your ruling planet and where in your chart are they, and what blessings and burdens has that brought to you in your life. And that is it for this episode. Let me know down below what you would like to see next, because I don't have a specific plan for what is going to be coming up next. I would like to talk about planetary days at some point in hours. And you know, I've got tons of things that I would like to talk about, but I'm kind of seeing it more as like a drop in and out of kind of series from now on, because I feel like this has given all of the tools to do a basic interpretation of your natal chart. And once you can read a natal chart, you know, I've said this loads of times, once you can read a chart, then you can also elect a chart, probably. And you can read a chart that's not a natal chart. You can read a chart for a country or a chart for a specific time and date, you know. So, yeah, have fun with it. Warmest blessings, and I will see you very soon.